My name is Alara, and for 31 years, I've considered myself a quiet person. Not shy, exactly, but someone who prefers the soft hum of a library to the clamor of a party, the gentle rustle of leaves to the insistent chatter of a crowd. I work as a graphic designer for a small, thoughtful firm in Maple Creek, a city that has always felt like a comfortable sweater familiar, a little worn, but warm. My life is a carefully curated collection of quiet moments, the earthy aroma of my morning coffee, the satisfying click of a well-designed website going live, the weight of a good book in my hands at the end of the day. My family, however, is not quiet. My parents, Arthur and Marion, are approaching their 60s with a kind of boisterous anxiety, a constant state of low-grade crisis that always seems to require an audience, and more often than not, a bailout. Then there is my younger sister, Chloe. At 25, she moves through life like a whirlwind, a beautiful, charming force of nature who has always been the sun around which our family orbits. I was the moon steadier, less dazzling, and expected to reflect her light. From a young age, the roles were set. Chloe was the one with dreams, and I was the one with a sensible savings account. 3 years ago, with the first real money I had ever saved, I bought a small cottage 2 hours north of the city, nestled in a fold of the hills people around here call the Whispering Woods. It wasn't a grand estate. It was a simple, wood-clad sanctuary with a wide stone hearth, floors that creaked with stories, and a porch that looked out over a valley of whispering pines. I called it Sparrow Hill Cottage. Work and the rhythms of city life meant I couldn't visit as often as my heart wished, but just knowing it was the Remy name on the deed, my key to the sturdy oak door was an anchor. It was the one place on earth that was unequivocally mine, a quiet testament to my own hard work and my own dreams. It was where I went to breathe. This story, the story of how my quiet life was fractured and then rebuilt, began on a misty Saturday morning. I was at my small kitchen table, nursing a mug of tea and watching the rain paint silver streaks on the windowpane. The peace was shattered by the ring of my phone. It was Mr. Abernathy, the kind, silver-haired realtor who had helped me find Sparrow Hill. He was a man of the old school, professional and unfailingly polite. Part of our original agreement was a handshake promise that if I ever decided to sell, I'd give him the first call. "Alara, my dear, hope I'm not disturbing you," he began, his voice laced with an uncharacteristic confusion. "A rather odd question for you. Are you planning on putting the cottage on the market?" I felt a small knot of confusion tighten in my stomach. "No, Jean, not at all." "Why do you ask?" "Well, it's just that I saw a listing for it pop up online. Went up about a week ago, it seems." He paused. "It's a very detailed advertisement. The photos are they're quite good. There's a contact number, but it isn't yours. I thought perhaps you'd had a change of heart and forgotten our little arrangement." The warmth of the tea in my hands seemed to vanish. My fingers felt cold. "A listing? I have no idea what you're talking about. Could you send me the link?" "Of course," he said, his tone shifting to concern. "And Alara, for what it's worth, if you are considering selling, I have a client who's been looking for a place just like yours for months. He saw the ad and called me, knowing I handle most of the properties up in the woods. He's very serious." After we hung up, I sat in a state of suspended animation, my gaze fixed on the phone. The text from Mr. Abernathy chimed a moment later. My hand trembled as I tapped the link. The screen lit up and my breath caught in my throat. It was my cottage. My Sparrow Hill. The photos were crisp and bright, showcasing the way the morning light filtered through the pine trees, the cozy nook by the fireplace, the view from the master bedroom window. But they were photos I had never taken. They were intimate and staged, as if someone had spent a day there with the sole purpose of making it look irresistible. The description was flowery and effusive, filled with details that were jarringly accurate. But it was the contact information at the bottom that made the world tilt on its axis. "For inquiries, please contact Marion." And there, listed in plain black and white, was my mother's phone number. A cold, sharp clarity cut through my disbelief. I didn't hesitate. I dialed my parents' number, my heart pounding a frantic, angry rhythm against my ribs. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice coated in the syrupy sweetness she reserved for when she knew she was in the wrong. "Alara, darling. What a lovely surprise." "Mom," I said, my voice tight and low. "Explain the advertisement." "The ones selling my house." There was a beat of silence, a tiny vacuum in which I could almost hear the gears of her justification turning. Then her voice became unnervingly calm. "Oh, you saw that?" "Yes, dear. We posted it." "Are you joking?" The question came out as a strangled whisper. "That is my house." "Alara, we had to," she said, her tone shifting into that familiar cadence of long-suffering reason. "You're so sentimental about that place. You never would have agreed if we'd asked you directly." I was on my feet now, pacing the small confines of my living room. "Of course I wouldn't agree. It's my property. You can't just decide to sell something that belongs to someone else." "Listen to me," she said, and her voice sharpened. "Your sister needs our help. Chloe just got married, you know that. And well, she's pregnant, darling. She and Tom need their own place, a proper home to start their family. The money from your cottage would be the perfect down payment on a lovely 2-bedroom condo downtown." The mention of Chloe, the pregnancy, the calculated appeal to my sense of duty, it was a playbook I knew by heart. But this time, the words didn't land as a guilt trip. They landed as a declaration of war. "I don't care what Chloe needs," I snapped, the words feeling foreign and powerful in my mouth. "It is not your decision to make." I heard a rustling sound, and then my father's gruff voice took over the line. "Alara, you need to start thinking about family for a change. You've become very selfish." "Selfish?" I laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. "Yes, selfish," he boomed. "Remember Chloe's wedding? We asked you for a little help, just 15,000 to make it perfect for her. And you gave us 5,000. A proper sister would have covered the whole thing without blinking an eye. The injustice of it burned. I had given them what I could afford, stretching my budget to its breaking point to contribute to a lavish wedding they couldn't afford. I gave you what I had. And now you're trying to steal my house from me." "It's not stealing," my mother said, snatching the phone back. Her voice was high and strained. "We are a family. We share. Chloe and Tom are struggling. And you, Alara, you barely even use that cottage. We're up there more often than you are, keeping an eye on it." The memory of the new, professional photos flashed in my mind. They hadn't just been keeping an eye on it. They had been casing it. "That doesn't make it yours," I said, my voice dangerously quiet now. "Be reasonable, Alara," Mom pleaded. "Your sister is bringing a new life into this world. This is what families do. We sacrifice for each other." I took a deep breath, trying to grasp for one last shred of logic in the swirling vortex of their entitlement. "Look, even if you found a buyer, this is all a fantasy. You can't sell it. You need my signature on the closing documents." My mother let out a small, airy laugh. It was the most chilling sound I had ever heard. "Oh, sweetie, don't you worry about that. We've got it all figured out." What do you mean?" "We have copies of all your important papers, darling. Your driver's license, your social security card. We've helped you with your taxes for years, remember? We have plenty of examples of your signature. Your father says it won't be a problem at all. A good forgery is all it takes." My father's voice chimed in from the background, smug and final. "We've been planning this for a while, Alara. We know exactly what we're doing." I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. They had already hung up. They had laid out their plan to commit felony fraud against their own daughter, and then ended the conversation as if they'd just told me what was for dinner. The line was dead, but their words echoed in the sudden, deafening silence of my apartment. For a long time after the call ended, I just stood in the middle of my living room, the phone still clutched in my hand. My body was rigid, but inside, a tremor had started, a deep, seismic shock that radiated from my core. They were going to forge my name. They had copies of my identification, samples of my handwriting, and a plan born of such breathtaking arrogance that it defied comprehension. My own parents. The anger came first, a white-hot wave that threatened to consume me. It was followed by a profound, cavernous hurt. I sank onto my sofa, the floral pattern of the cushions blurring through my tears. All my life, I had been the reliable one, the dutiful daughter. When Dad's car needed a new transmission, I drained my emergency fund. When their property taxes were late, I took on extra freelance work. When Chloe needed a security deposit for yet another apartment she couldn't afford, my checkbook was always open. I had done it all without question, believing it was the price of admission to this family, the cost of their love. Now I saw with sickening clarity that it had never been about love. It had been about utility. I wasn't a daughter, I was a resource. I was an investment they had made, and now they were ready to cash it in for the benefit of their preferred asset, Chloe. The laughter me mother's light, dismissive laugh when I mentioned my signature was the sound of my lifelong illusions shattering. They were so confident. They believed, with absolute certainty, that I would fold. They pictured me weeping, perhaps shouting for a day or two, but ultimately succumbing to the weight of their favorite weapon, guilt. Family comes first, Alara. Think of your pregnant sister. Don't be so selfish. They were counting on my quiet nature, my aversion to conflict. They were certain I would never call the police, never hire a lawyer, never fight back in any meaningful way. And in that moment, sitting in the ruins of what I thought my family was, something inside me shifted. A quiet, steady resolve began to form in the pit of my stomach. They thought this was a done deal. They wanted to have a race to sell my house. Fine. We would have a race. But I was going to cross the finish line first. My hands, which had been trembling, were now steady. I picked up my phone and dialed Mr. Abernathy. "Jean, it's Alara," I said, my voice clearer and firmer than it had been all morning. "About that client you mentioned. The one who's interested in the cottage. How serious is he?" "Very serious," from the sound of it, he replied, a note of pleasant surprise in his voice. "He's a retired detective from the city, looking for a quiet place to settle down. Says he's been searching for the perfect spot for years. So, you're thinking of selling after all?" "I am," I said, the words feeling like a liberation. "And I need to do it fast. As fast as humanly and legally possible." "How fast are we talking, Alara?" "If your buyer can close quickly, I'll take $15,000 off the asking price. And I'll give you a bonus on top of your commission if we can have the papers signed within the week." There was a thoughtful pause on the other end of the line. "The buyer's name is Miller mentioned. He has his financing all in order. He's a cash buyer, in fact. If he's as eager as he sounds, and if you can get your documents in order, we could potentially close by next Friday. Possibly even Thursday." "Perfect," I said, a surge of adrenaline washing over me. "Make it happen, Jean." After that call, I didn't sit still. A lifetime of passive acceptance had been replaced by a burning need for action. While I waited for Mr. Abernathy to work his magic, I turned my attention to the other, more insidious ways my family was entangled in my life. I logged into my online banking portal, my fingers flying across the keyboard. First, I revoked my parents' access to my checking account. I had granted it years ago, a supposed temporary measure when my father was having surgery and my mother needed help paying their bills online. They had never relinquished that access, and I had never had the courage to take it back. Until now. With a few clicks, the digital umbilical cord was severed. Then I navigated to the bill pay section. For 2 years, a recurring payment of $950 had left my account on the first of every month, sent directly to their mortgage company. It was a sum that kept me perpetually on edge, living paycheck to paycheck while they lived comfortably in a house I was helping to pay for. I stared at the scheduled payment, my thumb hovering over the cancel button. This wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming my own future, one that wasn't mortgaged to their needs. I pressed the button. Payment canceled. A profound sense of relief washed over me, so potent it felt like I could finally take a full, deep breath. Mr. Abernathy called back on Sunday morning. His voice was bright with success. "Good news, Alara. Mr. Miller is ecstatic. He accepted your offer immediately. He said he'd drive up to see the place in person tomorrow and, provided everything is as it seems, he's ready to sign as soon as the title search is complete. We're on track for a Thursday closing. The next few days were a whirlwind of emails, scanned documents, and calls with the title company. I moved with a focused, almost manic energy. I was racing against my own family, against their deception and their forgers. Each document I signed felt like a small victory, a brick I was laying in the wall that would finally separate my life from theirs. By Thursday afternoon, it was done. I sat in a sterile closing office downtown, signing the last of the papers. The title agent, a no-nonsense woman named Brenda, slid a check across the table. The amount was substantial, enough to change the entire landscape of my life. The cottage was sold. The money was mine. Sparrow Hill was no longer my sanctuary, but its sale had purchased my freedom. The timing was a quiet miracle. I had been struggling, really struggling, to keep up with my own mortgage payments on my small city condo. Now I could pay it off. All of it. And there would still be a significant sum left over, a cushion, a foundation on which to build a life free from financial anxiety. The best part, the part that brought a grim, triumphant smile to my face, was the silence. My family had no idea. They were still out there, blissfully unaware, probably showing their buyers around the exterior of a house they had no right to sell, polishing their story, practicing my signature. I didn't call them. I didn't text. I simply deposited the check, went home, and waited for the inevitable explosion. A part of me, the old, quiet Alara, felt a pang of guilt. These were my parents. Chloe was pregnant. But then I would remember the sound of my mother's laugh, the smug confidence in my father's voice, and the guilt would evaporate like mist in the sun. They hadn't asked for help. They had decided to take what was mine. They had treated my love and my labor as their entitlement. They had made their choice. Now, they would have to live with mine. 2 weeks passed in a strange, suspended quiet. I found myself checking my phone constantly, half expecting, half dreading the barrage of calls and texts I knew was coming. I imagined my parents finding another unsuspecting couple to tour the cottage, walking them up the gravel path, only to find their key no longer fit the lock. I pictured their confusion turning to indignation, their indignation to panic. Part of me, a new and unfamiliar part, was hungry for that confrontation. The storm broke on a Tuesday. My phone began to vibrate on my desk at work, my mother's name flashing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again. Dad. I ignored it. Then Chloe. Then Mom again and again. It was a frantic, digital assault. On the fourth call from my mother, I finally answered, leaning back in my office chair and taking a slow, fortifying breath. Alara, what on earth is going on? Her voice was shrill, stripped of all its usual manipulative calm. I went up to the cottage yesterday with the Henderson's theory, very interested. Lovely people, and our key wouldn't work. There are new locks on all the doors. Did you change the locks on us? I kept my own voice level, cool, and distant. I sold the house, Mom. A beat of silence. Then a sharp, hysterical laugh crackled through the phone. It wasn't a sound of amusement, it was the sound of a mind refusing to accept reality. Oh, that's very funny, Alara. A great joke. Now, be serious. The Hendersons are getting anxious, and your little prank is making things very complicated. Where's the new key? I'm not joking, I said, enunciating each word with precision. I sold the house. 2 weeks ago. The new locks were installed by the new owner. If you have questions about the property, you'll have to take them up with him. I don't own it anymore. I heard a sharp intake of breath, a strangled, sputtering sound. Before she could form a reply, I ended the call. The silence that followed felt powerful, final. But it wasn't the end. A few minutes later, Chloe called. I let it ring for a moment, steeling myself, then answered. Alara? What the hell? She shrieked, her voice a pitch higher than usual. Mom just called me, she's sobbing, talking about new locks and you selling the cottage. She's not making any sense. The cottage is sold, Chloe, I repeated, my voice a monotone. I sold it 2 weeks ago. That's not funny, she cried, her voice cracking with the petulance of a child whose favorite toy has been taken away. We've been planning this for months. I've already picked out the condo. Tom and I have been looking at nursery furniture. I even hired an interior designer. You can't just sell it now. The sheer, unadulterated entitlement of it was almost breathtaking. It was so pure, so unexamined, that I nearly laughed. I can and I did. It's my house, Chloe. It was never yours to plan around. But we need that money, she wailed. I'm pregnant, Ilara. We're trying to build a future, a family. Then perhaps you and Tom should have focused on building careers that could support that future, I said, the words sharper than I intended, but I didn't regret them. You're being cruel. You're just jealous, she accused. Just give Mom the key to the new locks so we can get this sorted out. We can still make this work. There is no key to give you, Chloe, I said softly, a deep weariness settling over me. The house belongs to someone else. It's time for you to figure out your own life. I hung up before she could respond. For the next few days, an eerie peace descended once more. I imagined the frantic phone calls flying between my parents and sister, the shock giving way to anger, the dawning realization that their perfect, foolproof plan had been comprehensively demolished. I should have known it wouldn't end there. Their arrogance wouldn't allow for a simple defeat. The call I had been half expecting came on Monday morning, but it wasn't from my family. It was from Mr. Abernathy, and he sounded deeply uncomfortable. Ilara, I am so sorry to bother you with this, he began, his voice low. I just received a call from Mr. Miller, the new owner of your old cottage. A knot of dread formed in my stomach. Is everything all right? Well, no, not exactly. It seems there was an attempted break-in at the property over the weekend. Mr. Miller had a state-of-the-art security system installed, with cameras. The alarm went off and scared the intruder away, but the whole thing was captured on video. My blood ran cold. Did they see who it was? Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat. There was a long, heavy pause. Yes, they did. Ilara, it was your father. I closed my eyes, a wave of nausea washing over me. Even after I'd told them. Even after my mother had seen the new locks with her own eyes. He had still gone up there, tools in hand, to break into a house that was no longer his. The sheer, stubborn delusion of it was staggering. The police were called, of course, Mr. Abernathy continued, his voice gentle. They arrested him. Mr. Miller wanted me to let you know what had happened. He's being very decent about it, all things considered, but as he pointed out, your father was caught on camera attempting to commit a felony by breaking into the home of a retired police detective. My mind struggled to process the information. Arrested. My father. No more than 10 minutes after I hung up with Jean, my phone rang again. It was my father. He sounded like a cornered animal. Ilara, you need to call the police. Right now. You need to call this Detective Miller and explain this whole ridiculous misunderstanding. What misunderstanding, Dad? I asked, my voice hollow. Tell them it's your house. Tell them I'm your father and I've always had access. Tell them you were just being difficult and changed the locks to spite us. Just fix this. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even now, facing criminal charges, his version of reality remained unshaken. I was the one who needed to fix the mess he had created by attempting to commit a crime. Dad, I told you. The house is sold. I told Mom. I told Chloe. Why would you try to break in? We didn't believe you, he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. We thought you were bluffing. Just making a point. We had a buyer lined up. Well, I was serious, I said, a cold finality in my tone. And now you're in serious trouble for trying to break into someone else's home. Ilara, for God's sake, please. Just make the call, he begged. No, Dad, I said, and the word felt like the closing of a heavy iron door. You did this. You and Mom. You have to face the consequences. He started screaming then, a torrent of abuse and accusations. I was a selfish, ungrateful, worthless daughter. I had destroyed the family. I had sent my own father to jail. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just quietly ended the call. A few days later, a story appeared on the local news website. Local man arrested in attempted burglary of retired detective's home. They didn't use his name, but the details were unmistakable. The article mentioned that the suspect had been belligerent during the arrest, hurling insults at the responding officers. He was facing charges of attempted illegal entry, possession of burglary tools, and disorderly conduct. The reporter noted that, given the circumstances, he could face jail time. The call from my mother came a week after the arrest. Her voice was a ragged whisper, shredded by tears. "Alara, please. You have to help us. We need money. For a lawyer. Your father." "My father got himself into this situation," I said, my voice devoid of the sympathy she was so desperately trying to mine. "This is all your fault," she shrieked, the grief instantly curdling into rage. "If you hadn't sold that house behind our backs, none of this would have happened. You did this to him." A dry, mirthless laugh escaped my lips. "My fault? I sold my own property to stop you from committing fraud and stealing it from me. And somehow, in your mind, I'm the villain. You have destroyed this family, Alara," she sobbed. "Your father could go to prison. Your poor pregnant sister is devastated she can't get her condo. We're going to lose our house now that you've stopped helping with the mortgage. You have robbed us of everything." "I've robbed you." The absurdity of it was a physical force, pushing me back in my chair. "You were literally planning to forge my signature to steal my property. My sanctuary." "We're family," she cried, the familiar, desperate refrain. "Family helps each other. Family doesn't steal from each other, Mom. Family doesn't lie and cheat and commit crimes against each other. You are an ungrateful child," she spat. "After everything we've done for you." "What, exactly, have you done for me?" I asked, the question genuine. "Besides raise me to believe my only purpose was to be your financial safety net?" She had no answer for that. There was only the sound of her weeping, interspersed with accusations of my cruelty and selfishness. "I'm done," I said, a profound sense of peace settling over me. "I don't want a relationship with any of you anymore. Please don't call me again." After I hung up the phone, I methodically went through my contacts. Mom, Dad, Chloe. I blocked their numbers one by one. Each press of the screen was a deliberate act of self-preservation. It was over. I was free. A month later, my Aunt Carol called. She was my mother's sister, but she was cut from a different cloth, pragmatic, fair-minded, and someone who had always treated me with a kindness that felt genuine, not transactional. She rarely involved herself in family disputes, so I knew the call was significant. "Alara, honey," she said, her voice warm. "I'm not calling to lecture you. I just thought you might want to know what's been going on." I braced myself. "Okay." "Well," she began, "Chloe and Tom moved in with your parents. They couldn't afford their apartment anymore, not with the baby coming. They've refinanced your parents' house and put it in Chloe and Tom's names. It was the only way to avoid foreclosure. Chloe and her husband are making the mortgage payments now." I had to admit, a sliver of grudging respect for my sister's cunning pierced through my detachment. She had always been presented as the helpless dreamer, but when her back was against the wall, she had secured her prize, a house. Not the condo she wanted, but a roof over her head, paid for by her husband. "What happened with Dad's court case?" I asked, my voice quiet. "He avoided jail time," Carol said. "He got 6 months probation and a hefty fine for the disorderly conduct. But his boss at the security company found out about the arrest. They fired him. He lost his job, Alara." The news landed with a dull thud. At his age, with an arrest record, finding another job in his field would be nearly impossible. Carol continued, her voice heavy with the weight of it all. "They had to borrow money from your uncle and me, and a few other cousins, to pay for his lawyer and the fine. They've since cashed out almost all of their retirement savings to pay everyone back. They're basically broke, honey." I was silent for a long moment, the image of their self-inflicted ruin stark and clear in my mind. "Well," I said finally, the words tasting like ash. "That's what happens." "I know what they did was wrong, Alara," Carol said gently. "Terribly wrong. But they're still your parents. They stopped being my parents the moment they decided my signature was something to be traced and my home was something to be stolen. I understand why you're angry, she sighed. Do you? I asked, a genuine question. Because I don't think they do. I don't think they ever will. After we hung up, I sat by my window, watching the evening settle over Maple Creek. A strange cocktail of emotions swirled inside me, a grim sense of justice, a deep and aching sadness for the family I had lost, and the startling realization that the family I was mourning had never really existed at all. It has been 7 months since I blocked their numbers. 7 months of profound, uninterrupted peace. The quiet I've always craved is no longer a temporary escape, but the very fabric of my daily life. It's a quiet that isn't empty, but full of potential. Full of me. The money from the sale of Sparrow Hill Cottage was more than a financial windfall, it was a key. The first thing I did was pay off the mortgage on my condo. The day I made the final payment, I felt a lightness in my chest I hadn't realized was missing. That, combined with the $950 a month I was no longer pouring into my parents' mortgage, fundamentally altered my existence. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't just surviving, I was building. I started a real savings account, an investment portfolio. I also did something I hadn't allowed myself to do in years. I bought something beautiful, just for me. My old, sputtering car was a constant source of anxiety, another bill waiting to happen. I sold it and bought a late-model Subaru, a safe, reliable car that smelled of new beginnings. Driving it off the lot, I felt a surge of pride that was entirely my own, unshared and undiluted by the needs of others. The most significant change, however, has been internal. The constant, low-level hum of anxiety that had been the soundtrack to my life has faded. I didn't realize how much space my family's endless cycle of crises occupied in my mind until it was gone. There are no more late-night phone calls about manufactured emergencies. No more carefully worded emails asking for a loan. No more tiptoeing around their fragile egos. I've started therapy, and my therapist, Dr. Anya Sharma, has given me the language for my experience. She called it familial financial abuse, and hearing those words was a validation that resonated to my very bones. You weren't a daughter to them in the end, Alara, she told me in one session. You were an emotional and financial utility. When you ceased to function as they expected, they deemed you defective. It was a harsh assessment, but it was true. My worth had been measured in dollars and cents, in my willingness to put my own needs last. Aunt Carol still calls every few weeks, a gentle bridge to a world I've left behind. She never pressures me to reconcile. She just delivers the news, like a small-town paper. Dad's probation is over, but he hasn't found work. Mom is working more hours at the supermarket, her face, Carol says, etched with a permanent exhaustion. Chloe had her baby, a little girl named Lily. A part of my heart ached when I heard that. I am an aunt. I have a niece with, I imagine, my sister's bright eyes and a future I will never be a part of. But then I remember Chloe's voice on the phone, her indignation that my life hadn't been put on hold for her convenience, and the ache subsides. Choices have echoes. Her choices created this silence between us. The situation at my parents' or rather, Chloe's house is, according to Carol, tense. The dream of a perfect little family has collided with the grim reality of living with broke, resentful in-laws in a house that feels more like a cage than a home. Chloe complains to Carol about feeling trapped, and her husband, Tom, is reportedly growing weary of the arrangement. The house that was supposed to be their foundation has become their anchor, weighing them all down in a sea of resentment. I confess, there are moments when I feel a quiet vindication. They were so certain their plan was a masterstroke. Instead, their lives are a tangled mess of their own making. And my life, the one they tried to dismantle for spare parts, is thriving. I am debt-free. I am saving. I am planning a trip to the coast next spring, a real vacation. Sometimes I walk past a community garden near my condo, and I think about Sparrow Hill. I miss the scent of pine and damp earth. But I don't miss the feeling of holding my breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm thinking of getting a plot in the garden next year. I want to feel the soil in my hands, to plant seeds and watch something grow that is entirely for me. The holidays are the hardest. The silence is louder on those days. I spent my birthday reading in a cafe, and it was blissful. But Christmas was a challenge. I volunteered at a downtown shelter, serving meals. Seeing the gratitude on the faces of strangers, sharing a moment of simple human connection, filled a part of the void. I know some would say I am cold, that I should forgive, that family is family. But forgiveness requires remorse, and from everything I've heard, my family remains firmly entrenched in the belief that I am the one who wronged them. They see my boundaries as cruelty, my independence as betrayal. There is no foundation there upon which to rebuild. So I am building something new. A life that is quiet in all the right ways. A life where my peace is not a commodity to be traded. A life where I am the sun, the moon, and the entire sky. It is a smaller world, perhaps, than the one I inhabited before, but for the first time, it feels completely and gloriously my own.